Welcome back. Now, at the time of their deaths, many South Africans leave their beneficiaries without a valid will or no clear instructions about their wishes, leading to complications and financial burdens for the deceased loved ones. Now, to highlight this matter, the National Wills Week is currently being observed until Saturday. Now, the aim of this week is to educate South Africans about the importance of having a will and to encourage them to draft or to update their wills. So, to give us more information about this, we join now virtually by Stian de Witt, who is Executive Head of Financial Planning at advisory firm NMG Benefits. Stian, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina.
Stian, perhaps a good place to start would be just to explain to people who and why it is important to have a will, because people may be thinking, I don't have much, so what's the point of even drawing up a will for the few things that I do have?
Yeah, unfortunately, some people, there's a major misnomer around wills, and people think that you need to have a lot of money to draft a will. And that is not the case, because a will also deals with things like what should happen to your minor children in case of your demise. Also things like, should you be cremated, or should you be buried? Is organ donation applicable? So a will is actually the most important document you will ever draft in your life, even more important than your marriage contract. So it is important that every single person in South Africa that has a dependent, financial dependent, or any form of assets or life insurance should draft a will. So that would say, I would say, most people beyond the age of 18.
And when going about this, Stian, how should one do this? Because that's the other question that people often have. Do I now need to consult a legal person? How do I go about drafting a will?
So the first thing is, it is very, I need to caution people, do not draft your own will writing it by hand, because there are some technicalities and legalities that you need to take into account. But you do not have to go and spend thousands of rands to go to an attorney. Now, in this Wills Week, if you go to an attorney, they will draft your will complimentary or free of charge. But there are also other avenues. There are in major companies out there, like you can go to the banks, you can go to financial planners, you can go to some websites that you can get a will drafted complimentary. So you do not have to go and spend thousands of rands to draft a will.
So if you, for example, take something from a website, is that legal? Is that enforceable? Or is there a bit more that you need to do in order to ensure that it is?
So the first portion is drafting the document. Now, with that, there are websites like on our website, nmgwills.co.za, you can draft a will complimentary, but the legalities around who needs to sign on the will, your witnesses, what color of ink do you need to use, all that type of stuff is also important to keep in mind. Also, unfortunately, in South Africa, a lot of other stuff you can sign digitally, documents you can sign digitally. A will is one of those documents that you cannot sign digitally. You need to have wet ink signatures on those documents. So there are legalities. That is why I really suggest you talk to a professional or someone that has the expertise of assisting you in drafting a will.
And once that will has then been drafted by whoever you choose to assist you to do that, what do you do then?
What we suggest people do, and what we also do with our client base, is you have two copies. One copy you keep in your safe custody, and another copy you ask the individual or the company that helped you draft the will, and sometimes be the executor of that estate, to keep another copy. So in case one of your copies gets lost in a fire or something like that, you at least have an additional original copy of that will.
Now, speaking of the executor of the estate, let's talk to those terms, Stian, and explain to people what that means and how do you go about deciding or appointing an executor?
That is a really, really good question. Now, the first thing, an executor is the person that is going to wind up the estate. Again, we suggest you get a professional to do that for you. Now, a lot of times people that draft will say that they want to be the executor. That is not necessarily the case, and people shouldn't be forced into choosing an executor that they do not want, because you have to look at operational capabilities. You have to look at things like, do they have the expertise and the knowledge to do it? Now, what we've seen, unfortunately, in the last few years with COVID and a lot of people passing away, there are even some of the banks and major institutions. In one case, we sat with a client that passed away last year in March. It took that specific bank until December just to lodge the estate at the master. Now, by law, it should actually take only 2 weeks. So when you talk to an executor, make sure they have the capabilities to do it, but also they can do it in time. Otherwise, the estate is being dragged on, and then the people and the beneficiaries do not get their money.
And when you talk about someone who actually has the capability, what are some of the drawbacks, for example, in appointing, say, one of your children or a relative or a family member or friend that you actually trust? Is there a greater benefit to actually appointing a professional or a firm as an executor as opposed to an individual that you may trust?
The challenge we currently have at the Master of the High Court is that 10, 15 years ago, they were very open for people to nominate a family member or someone as a beneficiary or as an executor on an estate. Currently, unfortunately, with what's happening at the Master, they are very hesitant. So if you haven't drawn up or wound up an estate in the past, or if you are not a professional, they would come to you and say you need to appoint an agent to finalize the estate. So you won't be able to finalize or be appointed as an executor without appointing an agent. So that agent is just going to do the same as what you would do and just charge a fee for it. So the benefit of that is you can go and negotiate on behalf of the estate of the person that passed away for a better fee. So that is one of the benefits. But just be careful that if you do not have the expertise, the Master of the High Court is very reluctant to help, to assist you and to wind up that estate. You have to get a professional to do it for you.
And in the event that someone passes on without having a will in place, never mind, the issue of the executor, without a will in place, what happens then?
Okay, that process is what we call interstate. Now, just be careful. It doesn't mean the estate is going to inherit all your assets. It just means there's a process that needs to be followed in order to determine who are the beneficiaries, who are financial dependents, etc., etc. Now, that is a lengthy and tedious process. The other challenge with that is if you have minor children and in your will you didn't nominate who are the guardians of your children or who are going to manage their finances on their behalf as a minor, that has a major impact, and funds can go to people that you do not want them to go to. And even some of your funds, if it needs to go to minors, will go and lie in the guardians fund, which in last year in May, June, had a 27 million rand fraud case lodged. So it is important that you decide where your money needs to go and who needs to manage that. And that is what a will does for you.
Now, Stian, who has the right to contest a will if one does actually legally exist?
So anyone can actually contest a will. But mostly what we see, it might be financial dependents or children or spouses or people that are close to the individual. Now, when you draft a will and the person is of sound mind, the will has properly been drafted with all the necessary witnesses signed on the date of you signing that will, it's very difficult to contest. You can, but there are major implications, and you need to be really sure that that will was not legitimately signed for you to really contest it and actually win the case.
And we also hear about, updating your will. How often should one have a look at your will after it's been drafted?
We suggest every single year, but at least when your circumstances change, because you might have drawn up a will when your children were small, and now they're out of house. They're financially on their own. You might have grandchildren. So when your situation change, or even if you go through a divorce, and now we know 50% of marriages in South Africa end up in divorce. So when you draft your will and you do not update your will 3 months after your divorce, then the law says and the master says you actually intentionally said that individual should inherit. So it is very important when you go through any major life changes that you update your will.
And Stian, just finally, is it true that 85% of South Africans actually die without a will?
Yes, that is the latest stats we got from PPS, is that at the Master of the High Court in Pretoria, 85%, which is only 1 out of 6 individuals, have a valid will when they pass away. So we in South Africa need to do a better job in using Wills Week and Corporate South Africa to go to our staff members and say, you have to draft a will. And there are great initiatives that's happening on employee assistance programs and other initiatives in Corporate South Africa where we can go to our staff members and say, listen, let's help you. And I think it's our responsibility to facilitate that process within our workforce.
Indeed. Stian, thanks so much. That certainly has been very informative. Stian de Witt is Executive Head of Financial Planning at advisory firm NMG Benefits, talking to us about the importance of having a will. And this is, of course, a week dedicated to wills. So it's National Wills Week, and there are resources available. So do make use of them until Saturday.